I invite the member for Surrey Cloverdale to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today I'm going to recite the firefighter's prayer, and to me it's a prayer that was on the wall of Fire Hall number 10 where I started my career, that you had to pass by it every day. When I'm called to duty, God, wherever flames may rage, give me strength to save a life, whatever be its age. Help me embrace a little child before it is too late, or save an older person from the horror of that fate. Enable me to be alert and hear the weakest shout, quickly and efficiently to put the fire out. I want to fill my calling to the best being me, to guard my friend and my neighbor, and to protect their property. And according to your will, if I must answer a death's call, bless me with your protecting hand, my family, one and all. Thank you.
Introduction by members. Members, before we invite members to, because usually we do that, today we have many of our wonderful firefighters in the audience in the gallery today. So rather than doing individual introductions, I, on behalf of all members, would like to say welcome to all firefighters and thank them for the best job, wonderful job that you do each and every day, putting your life on line, protecting our lives. So thank you very much. Welcome to the Legislative Assembly. Thank you. Member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to do what I'm about to do. Today joining us in the gallery is a leadership group of firefighters from British Columbia Professional Firefighters Association. Firefighters from across the province here in Victoria to discuss the important health and safety issues they face on a day-to-day basis. Later today, they'll be meeting with most of us to provide us with greater detail and answer any questions that you may have. A special shout out to those from Surrey, and a reminder to those people on the floor today. Should your excitement during QP bring upon mild chest pains, I'm sure there are enough first responders in the House to get you safely home today. Thank you.
Minister of Jobs and Economic Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'm so excited this morning to welcome Digital, previously known as the Digital Supercluster, which represents a collaborative effort to drive BC's competitiveness in the digital economy by leveraging BC's strengths in technology and innovation. Guests this morning are Sue Paish and her team at Digital, as well as member representatives First Line, VERG AG, and the SFU BD School of Business. Thank you for your efforts in seeking to accelerate the commercialization of breakthrough technologies, enhance BC's industrial performances, and train to skilled workforce for the future of BC. Would the House please join me in making them most welcome?
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and I just have two introductions today. Joining us today in the gallery is Michelle Hewitt with her service dog Leo. Michelle has lived in Kelowna for close to 19 years and recently became my constituent. She was a school principal in the Central Okanagan until she became disabled. Since then, she has become a disability advocate. She volunteers on the board of Disability Alliance BC, on the City of Kelowna's Accessibility Advisory Committee, on the National Government Relations Committee of MS Canada, and is the board chair of the National Organization Disability Without Poverty. Would the House please join me in welcoming Michelle and Leo? Also joining us in the gallery today is Matthew Wilson. Matthew is the Managing Director for Desolation Sound Consulting. He is one of the speakers at the BC Industry Tourism Conference 2024 taking place in Victoria this week. Matthew and his industry colleague, Desiree Baker, are hosting a skills development workshop at the conference called Successful Grant Writing, Tips, Tricks, and Techniques. Would the House please join me in welcoming Matthew?
Minister of Waterland and Resource Stewardship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's, I think, one of the greatest pleasure we have as MLAs when we're able to welcome students from our constituencies. For me, representing Stikeen, that's not every day, as a member from Prince George would know. And particularly today, we are welcoming 6th grade 8 to 12 students from Atlan, BC, which is a little over 2,500 kilometers away from where we are here today. These students fundraised to get down here. Their teacher, Rolene, and others helped make it possible. These are excellent, young, bright minds from the very northwest corner of our beautiful province. Would the House please join me in making these students from Atlan feel welcome?
Member for Kelowna West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great honor to stand up here and welcome the firefighters from around British Columbia for not only the official opposition from the community that I represent, Kelowna West, where, as most people realize, we suffered the most devastating wildfire in Canadian history this past summer. We would not have been able to save as many homes for families there if we had not had the support from the entire firefighting community from around this province. And I want to just a special shout out to all of the firefighters that came to West Kelowna during the middle of August this year. It was, they were fearless, they were supportive, and they fought. And we appreciate that. Thank you.
Burnaby North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple of guests in the gallery today. Kimberly Barwich is Director of Community Programs, and Sarah Shaw is Director of Children and Family for the Burnaby Neighbourhood House. And it occurs to me that they put out fires of a different nature, and they prevent fires of a different nature. I so appreciate the leadership that they show in creating strong bonds and supports in my community. So please join me in making them feel welcome in the House today.
Member for Nanaimo North Cowichan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a very big weekend this past weekend for intercollegiate sports in the Mid-Island region. I'd like members to help me congratulate the Vancouver Island University Mariners men's basketball team, which became PacWest champions, and the women's team, which won bronze. And for the first time ever, the men's VIU Mariners hockey team became BC Intercollegiate Hockey League champions. So congratulations to all those athletes, coaches, and the people who support them.
Minister of Water and Land.
With some apologies, Mr. Speaker, I introduced the good folks from Atlan, the young people that were joining us from farther northwest. I thought they were just hiding behind one of the pillars up in the gallery, but they were making their way through, and I see them now. So I'm going to introduce them again, these amazing young students. 30-hour drive, 2,500 kilometers away from where we are right now. They flew, right? They flew in, thanks, smart move. But just to welcome them here, it's just so great that our legislature can welcome young people, particularly from our smaller, more remote communities. They bring a brilliance and an identity that I think all British Columbians should cherish and welcome. So could the House please join me in welcoming them once more than now here in the gallery.
Member for Peace River North.
Yeah, thanks, Honourable Speaker, and I'm delighted here again to introduce a couple, I would call them warriors, incredible advocates for the persons with disabilities. Brent Frayne and Sonia Grandel, certainly no strangers to this place. They're here almost as much as I am, it seems. But I certainly do appreciate them coming down. Looking forward to meeting with them and you know, hopefully moving forward on helping persons with disabilities. Thanks, Mr. Honourable Speaker.
Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to recognize Disability Alliance BC in the House today, and also an amazing lineup of organizations and people whose advice and stories inform our government's work. Please join me in welcoming to the gallery Michael Putlas and Shane Williams with Lookout Housing Society, David Kennedy and Carol Peltier with Nanaimo Family Life Association, Jason and Julian Daly with Our Place Society, Kelly Beck and Matthew Kemshaw with Flourish Food Society, Caitlin Wright and Jillian Gaffney with Together Against Poverty Society, and Anina Zacher and Tresca Watson with Mustard Seed Food Bank.
Member for Richmond South Centre.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to wish Evelyn M. Ling Shum on her 80th birthday on June 8, 2024. 80th birthday is definitely a major milestone, so I'm asking the House to join me and wishing her a happy birthday.
Member for Vernon Monashee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm going to make a quick introduction for somebody who's not here, but will definitely be watching this video clip. It's my son, Avishan. It's his birthday. He's turned 8 today. So I just want to wish him a very happy birthday, and I'm so proud of him. He's such a caring, thoughtful, and very active boy. He's also my French tutor, and he is also fill in for CAs to go to community events. I don't know if it's more like spending time with mom or he likes community events. He tells me he likes those community events, and he asks the most brilliant questions after we leave event. So would the House please join me to wish Avishan a very happy birthday. Happy birthday, Avishan. I love you.
Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present a message from Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor.
Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor transmits herewith Bill number 7, entitled Social Development and Poverty Reduction Statutes Amendment Act 2023, and recommends the same to the Legislative Assembly. Minister.
I move that the bill be introduced and read a first time now.
Please proceed.
I'm pleased to introduce Bill 7, the Social Development and Poverty Reduction Statutes Amendment Act 2024. By updating 3 acts, the Employment and Assistance Act, the Employment and Assistance to Persons with Disabilities Act, and the Poverty Reduction Strategy Act, the province is continuing its work toward poverty reduction, reconciliation, and inclusive economic recovery. Since 2017, we've helped over 250,000 people out of poverty. But global inflation and the terribly increased cost of living have been especially hard on people who are already struggling. So we are setting new ambitious poverty reduction targets. Today's legislative change moves BC to 10-year targets and deepens them to reduce poverty by 60%, child poverty by 75%, senior poverty by 50%. Today, we're also updating our Foundational Income and Disability Assistance Acts to help people improve their lives, not punish them for falling short. We're getting rid of mean-spirited financial penalties that too often push people deeper into poverty. We're advancing our DRIPA and reconciliation commitments. And we're making significant change to the employment requirements for people on income assistance to better support them in finding and keeping a job. People say they feel better and are better off when they have a job. So we're reducing barriers for those who can work while continuing our supports for those who can't.
Is the first reading of Bill number 7, entitled Social Development and Poverty Reduction Statutes Amendment Act 2024, not 2023 as it was said earlier. So it will be Amendment Act 2024. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Minister.
I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Member for West Vancouver, Sea to Sky.
Mr. Speaker, I move that a bill entitled Safe Care Act 2024, of which notice has been given in my name on the order paper, be introduced and read a first time now. Mr. Speaker, parents across the province are crying out, desperately seeking tools that will help their children who are facing significant mental health and addiction challenges, challenges that put them at risk of causing harm to themselves or others. One of these parents is a constituent of mine, Brenda Doherty, who tragically lost her 15-year-old daughter to a drug overdose. Brenda's daughter fell victim to an older man who fueled her opioid addiction, leading to an overdose, subsequent transfer to Lionsgate Hospital, and after being released, she returned to that same man's home and died the following day from an overdose. Had a bill of this nature existed, Brenda's daughter could have had the crucial and necessary time for initial treatment that could have seen her alive today. Instead, Brenda and parents just like her across the province are left without tools and resources that would help them keep their kids safe. I do not take this bill lightly, Mr. Speaker. This is a last resort tool that can provide options to desperate parents while also respecting the rights and well-being of their children. We also recognize the overrepresentation of Indigenous youth in the child welfare system, and that preserving their cultural identity is essential in determining the child's best interest. This bill is in line with our Better as Possible plan that allows for the limited use of involuntary treatment to keep vulnerable youth and adults at risk of harm to themselves or others at modernized, compassionate facilities with 24/7 psychiatric and medical supports. This treatment under Better is Possible would include standards of care that create guardrails to ensure culturally appropriate and compassionate care is provided. It's time to take action, Mr. Speaker, to help ensure that young lives like Brenda's daughter are no longer lost in our province.
Question is first reading of the bill. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Member.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for the second reading at the next sitting after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Madam Clerk.
Statements by members.
Member for Kelowna West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I had the privilege of leading the Mount Bushry Bears robotics team from West Kelowna on a tour of the Legislature. Their enthusiasm was palpable as they delved into the inner workings of our democratic institution, gaining insights into the intricate processes that shape our governance. Today, I rise with immense pride to herald their recent triumph of this exceptional team. This past weekend, they didn't just participate in the Canadian Pacific Regional Qualifier in Victoria, they dominated, emerging as resounding victors and securing a coveted spot at the 2024 First Championship in Houston, Texas this April. Their outstanding performance in this competition reflects the accumulation of months of hard work, perseverance, and unwavering determination. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of those who have supported the Mount Bushry Bears robotics team in their journey. Their success is a testament to the collective efforts of the team, administration, and local businesses and the broader community. As they embark on their journey to represent our region on a global stage, let us rally behind them with unwavering support. The team requires funding to cover various expenses, including the registration fee, airfare, accommodation, and more for their trip to Houston. I call upon the generosity of our community and urge businesses and individuals alike to contribute to this cause. Join me in applauding the Mount Bushry Bears robotics team for their outstanding achievements and commitment to excellence. Their accomplishments serve as an inspiration to us all, of reaffirming the limitless potential of our youth in shaping a brighter future for generations to come. Thank you.
Member for Richmond Queensborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On December 20th, 2013, at the 68th session of the United Nations General Assembly, March 3rd was declared UN World Wildlife Day. This day holds significance as a day that the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora was signed in 1973. UN World Wildlife Day has now become a global annual event dedicated to wildlife. It's a crucial moment to reflect on the importance of preserving our planet's biodiversity. Our province's diverse ecosystems are home to a rich variety of species, from grizzly bears to orcas, each playing a vital role in maintaining ecological balance. Through sustainable practices, habitat preservation, and stringent regulations against poaching and illegal wildlife trade, we can ensure the survival of these magnificent animals for years to come. One of the key initiatives is the establishment and management of protected areas. BC boasts an extensive network of parks, marine protected areas, ecological reserves, and conservancies that provide safe havens for wildlife. These areas not only safeguard critical habitats, but also offer opportunities for the public to experience and appreciate our natural heritage. There's over 1,000 BC provincial parks and protected areas in BC, covering more than 14 million hectares of land. These are managed to conserve biodiversity and provide recreational opportunities while minimizing environmental impacts. Our Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy also collaborates with Indigenous communities and nonprofit organizations to protect at-risk species. This, bolstered with regulations and guidelines to mitigate human-wildlife conflicts, like regulations around hunting and fishing, carefully ensure sustainable practices that don't endanger wildlife populations, or that, like the grizzly bear hunt, serve to protect and help populations thrive. Encompassing all of this is Clean BC. We've shown leadership, Mr. Speaker, that is world-renowned in addressing broader environmental issues that impact wildlife, initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect water quality, and promote sustainable land use. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Skeena.
In 1947, the Prince Rupert All-Native Tournament was actually created in Prince Rupert. 40 years later, the Junior All-Native Boys and Girls Basketball Tournament took shape, with the top teams from each zone earning the right to go to the Junior All-Native Provincials. Over the past few years, the zone competitions were eliminated, and any First Nation could attend the Provincials, making it one of the biggest tournaments in BC. Not many First Nations can host these Provincials in their communities anymore, so partnerships with neighboring towns are imperative. In 2024, the Niska Nation is this year's host in Terrace, BC. There will be over 1,200 athletes coming with 80 teams coming to Terrace to compete in 4 divisions from March 18th to the 22nd, joined by their families and fans. The economic impact of these tournaments is huge, whether it be basketball, hockey, or soccer. In 2023, the Lakalzap won the under-17 boys title, Newholt won the under-17 girls championship, the Vancouver Island Seawolves won the under-13 boys, and the Cowichan Surge won the under-13 girls. If it wasn't for basketball, my life would have taken a drastic direction. I would have been a statistic that we read so much about in terms of First Nations youth and adults. So as an adult, I went from playing to coaching, and I tried to give the next generation the same experience I had as a young Indigenous youth growing up on a reserve or in an urban setting. Sports, music, and academics are what I encourage youth to get involved in, especially with discipline. And in today's world, where the distractions are much more severe than when I was growing up. As a player, parent, and past coach, I wish all the participants and fans the best possible experience. Enjoy your time together and take your lessons learned in this tournament as important life lessons for your future. Congratulations, Terrace and Niska Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Boundaries, Milkameen.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Yesterday, I had the privilege, along with a number of other members of our caucus, to meet with the UBC medical students and their political advocacy committee. I thank them for the work they're doing. They commended us on the action that our government has taken on many of the pieces that they're working towards, highlighted some elements that they felt like needed more attention, like emergency department safety nets, improvements to hospital systems, as well as one of the top 5 items was prioritizing rural transportation. Sebastian in the group referred in that bit of the conversation around the notion of something that was based on urban normative policy, and that term certainly seized me, and he identified how I could read a little more about it. I followed up with the work of Paul Peters and Heidi Hodge and Dean Carson, and their communication about how the world is urban-centric and our policies and systems are urban normative. I bring it up in this House because I think it matters, for example, to the students that are here from Atlin, that the work that we do in this place delivers flexible policy that works well for rural communities and rural people like our guests here today. They talk in that work around the reframing away from this notion of rural as disadvantaged and instead reconceptualizing rural as different and working on that. They talk about the difference between recognizing that rural policy does not equal urban policy and trying to make rural services like urban services is not the strategy we need. They talk about flexible health systems need to be small, dispersed, and sustained through multiple connections that are distant as well as proximate. These are the kinds of efforts, I think, that the work in this place I'm proud to be a part of helps deliver. I'm honored to be part of a team here in Victoria that is working so hard to support the dynamic and creative work of rural communities across the province. Thank you.
Member for Kamloops North Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Friday, March 8th, the 419 Squadron will have their colours stood down for another time, and people in this place may wonder why a squadron in Cold Lake, Alberta for the Canadian military is being referenced in this chamber today. But the 419 Squadron has a very long history and connection to both Kamloops and, in fact, this chamber. Created in 1941, its first wing commander was John Moose Fulton from Kamloops. And in fact, his father was an MLA in this chamber for 10 years, and before that, his grandfather on his mother's side was actually our 8th Premier, A.E.D. Davey, who the street in Vancouver is named after. When the squadron was created, it quickly became our most decorated bomber squadron in World War II. As the years have progressed, it has transitioned into becoming a training squadron, which will now cease until the new planes arrive for Canada. John Fulton, though, the Moose tagline came from an interview with an RAF officer when he heard that he was from the wilds of Western Canada, and he spun a yarn about hunting to try to get the job. And so although he had never hunted before, Moose became the story of the day, and hence his nickname. It has a very strong relationship with the City of Kamloops. The City of Kamloops adopted the squadron in 1943, and in fact in 1944 purchased the 100th Lancaster bomber produced to send over specifically for the 419 Squadron. Over the years, the relationship has ebbed and flowed, but it is stronger than ever before. Every commander since has been named the tagline Moose as well, and that is why the squadron is named the Moose Squadron, in recognition of their first commander, who only had around an 8-month run as commander before he unfortunately was shot down in World War II himself. And so I look forward to the standing down of the colours, but I look even more forward to the colours being reinvigorated again as they were in 1954 and 1975, and now hopefully in the not too distant future as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for North Vancouver Seymour.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. As I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm working and staying on the lands of the Lekwungen, specifically the Songhees and Esquimalt people. North Vancouver Seymour, my riding, where I live and work, is also in the territory of the Coast Salish, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish nations. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn with these Indigenous communities. Canopy Health is a community clinic in Lynn Valley, North Van. On the website, it says Canopy Health was created in response to a growing need for primary care providers combined with supportive allied health network to create an accessible, inclusive, and trauma-informed clinic using collaborative team-based model of care to provide a comprehensive approach to whole body and mental health. Their primary care provider team consists of nurse practitioners and midwives, fully complemented with other allied health professionals, including physiotherapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, massage therapy, occupational therapy, psychological counseling with mental health, somatic trauma therapy. Imagine all those skills under one roof and working together. This remarkable team of clinicians provides holistic, safe, and appropriate cradle-to-grave care to everyone, embracing the care needs of a diverse client population. This is the only clinic in Canada with primary care fully provided by nurse practitioners and midwives. They hold 1,500 clients at present, looking to double that in the next year. They are onboarding unattached patients referred through the local division of family practice, maternity services in both hospital and community, and self-referrals. They are actively reducing the number of patients who do not have primary care providers. Honourable Speaker, Canopy Health Clinic addresses several of the challenges of our healthcare system that's facing through utilising a full scope of practice of nurse practitioners, midwives and other allied health professionals. I thank them for their vision, their service and their commitment to community health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Member for Abbotsford West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. We all remember last fall's famous leaked memo disclosing the Premier's demand for a big and shiny pre-election announcement. Well, the largest inflationary budget deficit in the history of BC certainly qualifies as big. But it turns out the shiny bauble is going to be a paltry rebate from BC Hydro that works out to about 25 cents per day. But if that isn't bad enough, Mr. Speaker, we now know that in a classic NDP rebate and switch, 3 weeks ago, the Cabinet signed off on an order changing the definition of inflation in a way that would actually allow for a BC Hydro rate increase of up to 16%. So my question is this: why is the Premier publicly telling British Columbians that rate increases will be held to the annual rate of inflation? At the same time, he and the Cabinet are quietly signing orders that would allow for a rate increase of up to 5 times that amount.
Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm sorry to hear that the member doesn't feel that providing a rebate to people at a time when they're facing the cost of inflation and high interest rates, the high cost of housing, the high cost of childcare, all of the things that we're doing to provide money for people, put it back in their pockets. I'm sorry to hear that the member doesn't think that's a good thing to do.
Members, let
Speaker.
the Minister finish her answer, please.
Mr. Speaker, we know that people are struggling right now, and that's why the BC electricity affordability rebate puts money back on through people's hydro bills back into their pockets so they can spend it on the things we know they need and want to do that. But Mr. Speaker, that's not the only action our government is taking to help people with the cost of living. Reducing childcare fees, reducing ICBC premiums, eliminating several years ago one of the biggest tax cuts in history here, eliminating MSP premiums, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that people need help, and that's why our government is here at people's backs, and we're going to continue to support them in every way that we can. Thank you.
Abbotsford West supplemental.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are going to be parades in towns across British Columbia celebrating that 25 cents a day. It's possible. But I think what's more likely, Mr. Speaker, is that people are going to see through the manipulation. The manipulation that involves the Premier and now Minister touting a bauble that equates to 25 cents a day, pretending to provide assurance that future increases will be at the annual rate of inflation, when in fact they are quietly signing cabinet orders that would allow for a post-election rate increase of 5 times that amount, Mr. Speaker. On top of that,
clear evidence that the minister, the premier, the government won't take no for an answer. After firing the chair and the CEO of the Utilities Commission, BC Hydro has launched an unprecedented 4 reconsideration requests, Mr. Speaker. The question again to the Premier, with the possibility of a rate increase of up to 16% looming after the next election, why should British Columbians derive any comfort from the Premier's big and shiny 25-cent pre-election promise?
Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, I find it astonishing that somebody would laugh at a rebate people are getting on their BC Hydro bills. The fact that we understand that people are facing challenges right now and they need every bit of help they can get, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, the member's asking questions about BC Hydro, and I guess I'm glad he is, because I think he doesn't want to talk about their government's record on BC Hydro when they were on this side of the House. Mr. Speaker, under their 10-year rates plan, families today would be paying $140 more on their BC Hydro bill than they are now. Mr. Speaker, under their leadership, rates skyrocketed 80%. That's 5% a year on average over the 16 years on this side of the House. Mr. Speaker, we're not doing that. We understand that people need affordable energy rates. We're taking action. BC Hydro's last application for rates increase holds at 2.3% a year. Mr. Speaker, we're working hard to make sure people have the energy they need, the efficient appliance they need, the ability to switch to heat pumps, and, Mr. Speaker, affordable energy bills. Thank you.
Member for Kamloops North Thompson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that will be literally cold comfort for people when they're not able to meet the energy demands in the next cold snap when this government cuts access to gas and we don't have enough electricity. But let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, this government, by their own words in 2017, Site C was on time and on budget. Then they opposed Site C, and it's more than doubled in cost. Then they blocked First Nations clean energy projects, saying that they weren't a good value for people either. And now they're trying to re-engage them at a higher cost to ratepayers. They're playing politics with the finances of BC Hydro, plain and simple, with the rebate and switch scheme that they've got going. Meanwhile, the Premier is tripling the carbon tax on families forced to choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table. Imagine the frustration of those families that are reliant on natural gas, Mr. Speaker, when they realize with the rebate and switch program they're going to get 25 cents a day for 1 year only, and then their rates are going to go up by 16% next year. Will the Premier deliver real relief by removing the carbon tax on all home heating today?
Minister of Energy and Mines.
Mr. Speaker, people's hydro rates and bills are not going to go up 16% next year. That's just fabulous math on the member's part, but simply not true. And in fact, over the last 6 years, we have kept BC Hydro rate increases below the cumulative cost of inflation. Mr. Speaker, the member mentions the last cold snap. We were able to supply electricity to our neighbours, Alberta, at a time when they needed it most. That's because BC Hydro is operating a resilient system.
Member.
That's because BC Hydro is
Just hold it,
operating.
Minister. Members, please continue.
That's because BC Hydro is operating a resilient system, one that we know needs to adapt and change given the way climate is changing. That's why we have the spring call for power coming in April to diversify the sources of energy that we use here in British Columbia, to add more electricity to our growing economy, to the people who are moving here to BC. That's why BC Hydro's 10-year capital plan is $36 billion. Mr. Speaker, we're going to deliver clean, safe, reliable, affordable energy to British Columbians for years to come. Thank you.
Kamloops North Thompson supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You'd think the Minister of Energy would also want to acknowledge the reason we got through the cold snap was 2/3 of the energy consumed in British Columbia then was provided by natural gas, not electricity. And news for the minister, it's their order in council that is trying to redefine and recalculate what inflation actually means for BC Hydro. So imagine how the families feel upon discovering that the NDP's solution to their inflation struggles was to simply change the definition of inflation, Mr. Speaker. Removing the carbon tax on home heating would provide a genuine rebate, offering real relief and making life more affordable for people. Tax cuts drove down the inflationary pressures in Alberta and Saskatchewan, which is exactly what BC United would do, Mr. Speaker, but the Premier insists on driving up the cost of gas, rent, groceries, and home heating every single day while families continue to suffer. Why is this Premier living in an alternate reality, refusing to give real relief from inflation, such as cutting the carbon tax on home heating today?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, one thing we all do know is that the world is changing around us and climate change is having a real impact, and people want to do their part in fighting pollution, and they want to be able to afford their energy bills. That's why our government continues to take action. The BC Electricity Affordability Credit, nothing to laugh at. Again, I'm so disappointed to hear that somebody would think this is not a good idea to help people at a time when they need that help the most. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to help people with costs. We're going to continue to deliver more housing. We're going to continue our work on childcare spaces, reducing fees for people, reducing ICBC rates, providing free contraception. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on. This government has people's backs, and we will not stop.
House Leader of Third Party.
Mr. Speaker, our former Social Democratic government here claims to look after the most vulnerable people in British Columbia, but their actions fail to meet their rhetoric on almost every, including this bill, actually, that we're just going through, the one that was just tabled today. Clause by clause debate on that bill is going to be interesting. But when a person's estate and their next of kin can't afford their funeral, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction pays for basic funeral services, but they won't pay for a grave marker. So this government is burying people in unmarked graves. The cost to the minister is about $850 each, or $3.3 million a year. That's about 0.004% of our $89 billion budget. So why has this minister failed the most vulnerable people in our society so miserably? To the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, why did she fail to secure the funds to provide our lowest income citizens the dignity of a basic grave marker?
Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All people deserve dignity in death. In the cases when people cannot afford it, then our ministry does pay for the costs of the necessary funeral costs. That includes costs of cremation and burial, the services of funeral home, maybe a small service for the family to mourn. Families and loved ones can choose the funeral home of their choice. And funeral homes take great care with record keeping to treat people's remains respectfully. Families are able to choose the burial for their loved one, the form of it, and there's a plot chosen, and families can go to visit their departed family members and to pay their respects. I have been meeting with the BC Funeral Association. I understand their concern about costs given global inflation. They haven't raised the grave markers question, but we'll continue to meet with the industry and to hear from people across the province around how we can best support families who are of low income at the most difficult time.
House Leader of Third Party Supplemental.
This issue was canvassed with the government last year in budget estimates. I believe that there was a story in the Times Colonist about this. The Funeral Services organization has reached out to our constituency office to raise this issue. We've raised this issue with the minister in the weeks leading up to this spring session. We've had considerable back and forth with the minister's staff. It amounts to about a $3.3 million spend in an $89 billion budget. And the response was that the minister wasn't able to convince the finance minister to be able to provide those funds for the most vulnerable, lowest income residents in our society to have a basic grave marker. As the minister said, all of the other costs, Mr. Speaker, are covered, and they're outlined in the legislation. A simple change could allow for people to have in perpetuity a grave marker. But this government continues to make excuses. They made excuses last spring. They're making excuses today, pretending like this is a new issue. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, why has this minister failed to provide the basic dignity of a basic grave marker to the lowest income citizens in our society?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All people in British Columbia deserve dignified burial. That is what our existing budget funds. With the funeral service providers taking great care that families are able to visit the grave of a loved one, the family having chosen the place, the funeral service, and the decision about cremation versus burial. We continue to work with the Funeral Association. We're very grateful to the funeral service providers across British Columbia that continue to provide services to people who are low income at their very most difficult time. We continue to be in active conversation with them about the costs of the existing services, given the terribly increased cost of service provision because of global inflation. This has not been on their list of wishes. There are other pieces that they have ahead of grave markers, but we continue to hear from people across the province about their priorities and how it is that they want us to invest and care for people at the most difficult time.
House Leader of the Fourth Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In 2021, this government created Tiny Town. They took 30 people from local shelters and dropped them into shipping containers located in the heart of Victoria's North Park neighbourhood. Residents of North Park described a horror show. Piles of garbage, night brawls, defecation, street sex, constant thefts and break-ins. One resident, Jody Sigsworth, was awakened in the middle of the night to find a man she did not know standing at the foot of her bed with his flashlight pointed in her face. Victoria families thought their nightmare had finally ended when the project was terminated, rightfully so, last September after 2.5 years of chaos. But they've just been told that the NDP is bringing Tiny Town back. Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, there aren't any tiny towns in Vancouver's Point Grey. Why doesn't he be the change he wants to see in this world and surround his own family, who live in one of the richest neighborhoods in North America, with sea cans harboring criminals?
Members. Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And I cannot believe the members talking about the most vulnerable people in our communities that way, dropping them off in shipping containers in communities. I mean, if you want an example of Trump-style politics coming to British Columbia, Honourable Speaker, that question right there is it. Okay. Honourable Speaker, people are struggling in our communities. We have to find ways to ensure that they get access to housing so that we can provide them the supports that they need so they can find stability in their lives. Now, this project the member talks about has been in the community for a few years. It certainly had some challenges early on, but after adjustments were made to the programming, to staffing, we were able to provide a lot of people supports. In fact, a lot of people were able to get the stability in their lives that they needed to be able to get back into community, get back into employment, connect with families again, Honourable Speaker. That's the type of dignified support I think all people in this House want to see in their communities. Now, the member talks about the Premier. He knows there's supportive housing sites in the Premier's writing. There's supportive housing sites in all our communities. We need to find ways to support everyone where they are, Honourable Speaker. We're proud of that work. We're going to work with the community. We're working with the City of Vancouver, Victoria. We're working with the Victoria Police, who have also shared with us that they believe that that site now, because of the changes that have been made, was actually fairly safe in the community. Honourable Speaker, this is from the Victoria Police Chief. So we're going to continue to work with our partners to support the most vulnerable people in our communities.
House Leader, the fourth party supplemental.
I guess that's why they canceled that program, Mr. Speaker. It was so safe. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Housing has just awarded the contract to run a new Victoria shelter to Solid Outreach Society. This is a tax-funded group who pays employees $30 an hour to hand-deliver crack pipes, munchies, and marijuana to addicts tenting in Victoria playgrounds. So, my question to the Minister, will he at least let taxpayers know what flavor of Doritos our taxes will be paying for Victoria's newest housing project?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Again, we won't take lectures from a person who, when he was mayor of Abbotsford, dumped manure on homeless campments. This is a person who was the mayor of Abbotsford dumping manure on homeless encampments as his way of addressing challenges for homelessness. So we're not taking any advice from this member, Honourable Speaker. How to ensure that the most vulnerable people have supports. We're going to continue to work with communities to find ways to make sure people are safe, that they have the supports they need, Honourable Speaker. We are in challenging times, not only in BC, but across North America. We are committed to continue to support the most vulnerable people in our communities.
Member for Surrey South.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. As a society, we have an obligation to provide care for the most vulnerable, including involuntary care when necessary. Honourable Speaker, we failed that duty with Stephanie Lawrence, who died at just 15 from a fentanyl overdose. Brenda Doherty, Stephanie's mom, joins us today seeking answers and action. More lip service from the Premier on involuntary care for vulnerable youth is simply not good enough. How many more young lives must be lost before this Premier acts? Will he please commit today to support involuntary care for our most vulnerable youth, either by calling the opposition's private member's bill or by introducing his own? Thank you.
Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member across the way and everyone in this House who is bringing forward concerns, a concern that we share with regard to how we can best protect and provide services and supports that youth in our communities need. We have made significant investments over the last number of years to build up a system of care and support for children and youth in our healthcare system, in our mental health care system. And we know, of course, that there is more to do. But just yesterday, we announced that one of the largest investments in child and youth mental health to get in and ensure that we can be reaching in the river upstream, be providing early intervention and prevention services for youth. Out of our 2022 budget, we invested $75 million in an early psychosis intervention program in our hospitals. We are engaged in a system and in a process that is transforming inside our healthcare system how we are providing care and support for youth who need it, to make sure that we can be there when they are in crisis. And as they transition out into community services. We'll continue to do that work. We'll continue to work with community partners, our health authorities, all partners, in order to ensure that we can protect youth in our province.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
The release of convicted repeat sex offender Taylor Dewick into our community without warning is a complete violation of trust between this NDP government and those it is supposed to serve. At no point was anyone told about this predator's criminal record, the condition that he have one-to-one supervision at all times, and that he was not to be around children. While children were arriving for after-school lessons, this convicted child molester's supervisor sat in the parking lot in his vehicle for 2.5 hours. The result was an 11-year-old girl being cornered and sexually assaulted in the bathroom by this predator. How can this NDP government have allowed this total failure to happen? And who is going to take responsibility for this complete and utter failure so it never happens again?
Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And as the member will know, when this came to our attention last week, the first thing I did was, one, express our extreme disgust and anger at what is taking place, and immediately ordered a full investigation and accounting of all provincial, federal agencies involved and officials involved to get to the bottom, to find out exactly what happened. Was it a systemic failure, or was it a failure of an individual? That work is underway to ensure that this never happens again, and so this government most certainly has taken action.
Member supplemental.
No. Someone has to be accountable. This 11-year-old girl deserves better. Our community is traumatized. That 11-year-old is traumatized. And our communities are not going to be protected by some investigation and analysis and report. People are sick and tired of the Premier and this minister's feigned indignation in the face of horrific failures that leave innocent people victimized, only to see them do absolutely nothing to prevent it from happening again. Make no mistake, the Premier and this NDP government, they're the architects of this system. The Premier was the former Attorney General and is now Premier. It's under his watch that the system prioritized this sexual predator's privacy over the safety and well-being of our children, over the safety and well-being of that 11-year-old girl. With Taylor Dewick's bail hearing tomorrow, parents and my entire community are traumatized and fearful that he's going to come back if he's released. The Premier needs to be held accountable and needs to stop prioritizing the rights of a pedophile over the rights of a community to feel safe. Who is going to take responsibility for this total failure to protect our children?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hear the passion and anger in the member's question, and I share that anger. I know the Solicitor General very quickly ordered an investigation. We need to get to the bottom of this. An 11-year-old child has been hurt, and we as a government take that extremely seriously. We need to get to the bottom of it. We need to find out what happened to make sure this never happens again in this province to another child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, British Columbians are not just outraged by the release of a repeat sex offender in Kelowna. Peter Warren is a pedophile who has been released in Richmond 3 times. 3 times just in the past 2 weeks, despite using Snapchat to lure underage children. First, he was arrested on February 21st and promptly released on bail. He was then rearrested on February 23rd when he immediately breached his bail condition, which includes not being alone with anyone under the age of 18 and not going to any park, only to then be released on bail a second time. And now this pedophile has been arrested again for going back to the same park. But Mr. Speaker, unbelievably, he has been released a 3rd time on bail. British Columbians are saying enough is enough. How can this Premier possibly defend this catch and release treatment of dangerous pedophiles, resulting in monsters like this individual and the one previously quoted by the member from Kelowna Mission, resulting in people like these being released back into the community over and over and over again? It's got to stop.
Attorney General.
I want to thank the member for the question. We need to make sure that our communities are safe. We need to make the investments necessary to make sure that our communities are safe. Our government is working very hard to change federal laws. We led the charge to change the bail of the law of the land in Canada to make sure that repeat violent offenders were not released into our communities. We've stood up resources directed at repeat offenders that are there to make sure that those offenders are treated in the way that keeps communities safe. Mr. Speaker, when you hear stories like that, I think British Columbians want to make sure that their government is taking action. We are listening, we are learning, and we are taking action, and I will continue to do that in my role as Attorney General. I know the Solicitor General and the whole of government will do that when it comes to this. Thank you.
The bell ends the question period. Members, I have the honor of tabling the Ombudsperson's report on the road again fixing a long-standing injustice in Section 42 of the Transportation Act. Madam Clerk.
Orders of the day.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call continued debate on the budget in the main House.
Opposition House Leader.
This way. Okay.
Thank you, members. We're going to resume debate on the budget. If you're able to make your ways to where you need to go, we will be starting with the Opposition House Leader. All right, members, let's go. Recognizing the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to add my thoughts to the 2024 provincial budget, and I do so standing here as a very proud British Columbian. I will say this, I would characterize the 2024 budget of the current Premier as having dropped with a heck of a thud. Instead of providing relief for people struggling, the NDP have full-on reverted to their core tendency, their default, and that is to spend massive amounts of money, all the while delivering less. It's classic NDP planning and execution where you spend a heck of a lot more for something, but you get a lot less. This budget is characterized by the largest deficit that we've seen in this province's history at $8 billion per year, $28 billion of deficits cumulatively over the 3 years of this fiscal plan. It has been characterized as an atmospheric river of red ink. And to talk about this in the context of the debt that has built up in this province, it took 150 years for successive governments of all political stripes in this province's history, the first 150 years, cumulatively to build a debt of $50 billion. Mr. Speaker, the NDP have doubled that debt in just 7 years. The debt stands at $103 billion. And they plan to add another $62 billion of debt to that number. This will increase the debt per British Columbian by over 150%, from $8,500 per person to $22,000 per person of debt. Spending is up 75%. Certainly don't think that there's a single government service anywhere in this province that's improved by 75%. Taxes are up $22 billion per year since this government took office. That's through 32 new and increased taxes. April 1st, the carbon tax will increase to 14 cents per litre. It's a 164% increase in 7 years, and this government has plans to double it again over the coming years. And if all of that spending and all of that taxing and all of that debt that's been layered onto the shoulders of our children and grandchildren isn't enough, they're going even further in what is clearly an election budget by removing a number of guardrails that you know, and better ensure that the numbers outlined in the budget are actually achieved. And the government has done that by shrinking contingencies and by actually removing the forecast allowances. They've also done it by including as one of the key metrics that drive the numbers in the budget, the projected growth rates in this province. They've gone with a number that is actually higher than their own independent economic forecast council. Mr. Speaker, they have not accounted for higher borrowing costs from the credit downgrades that are surely to come. And I remind those listening that when the province's credit is downgraded, that results in significantly higher interest costs on the debt. That's made even worse when you've amassed so much more debt. And what that ultimately means is more taxes and a reduction in services. Certainly means terrible, terrible results from this government. When we look at the jobs picture, the NDP have made an art form of prioritizing public sector growth over private sector growth. They're growing the public sector at 4 times the rate of the private sector. Mr. Speaker, without private sector jobs, we're not going to be able to pay off the provincial credit card that the NDP are maxing out in this budget and the subsequent budgets coming. If we don't grow the economy, this is going to, again, mean an increase in taxes. It's going to mean the NDP digging even deeper into people's pockets. I want to put a finer point on this private sector, public sector dynamic that has evolved under this government. A government that's been in power for 7 years and has grown the public sector by 133,700 net new positions. I'll say that again, 133,700. That's the number of additional people working in the civil service, working across all of government. And at the same time, the private sector has experienced growth at a much smaller level of 34,900 jobs. Well, that's over the past 5 years of this government, 133,700 in the public sector, 34,900 in the private sector. That's not sustainable, Mr. Speaker. Contrastingly, the last 5 years of the former government, the BC United, BC Liberal governments, we grew the public sector by 26,300 positions in that 5-year period, while the private sector grew by almost 260,000 positions. That highlights a very, very stark difference in the priorities, the focus, the jobs lens, so to speak, of the two governments, the previous and current. I was very proud to be part of a government that actually required, as a condition of cabinet approval on a whole wide range of items, a requirement to actually explain to one's colleagues what the potential impacts, positive or negative, are of a decision on jobs, private sector jobs. What is this going to do to actually help flourish or help frustrate the private sector? It was a critical question that the former government applied to everything that it did. This government doesn't do that. And the result is this incredible disparity. Now, as I said, $28 billion of additional deficits over the next 3 years, massive increase in taxes, $22 billion per year of more tax under this government, huge increases in debt, doubling it to this point in 7 years, with more to come. And yet, by every single measure, this government's delivering the worst results you could possibly imagine. You know, British Columbians have never struggled more from an affordability perspective than they are today. They're struggling with the level of taxes, as I said, the overall cumulative take of this government out of the pockets of British Columbians. Carbon tax is going up again soon. That'll add another 14 cents a litre to fueling your minivan. Fuel taxes, the price of groceries. On and on it goes. We've offered a number of solutions. We're heading towards an election this year. This is the last budget before that election. It's increasingly important for British Columbians to understand what the compare and contrast looks like between the different political parties. And so I'm really proud of our leader, the official leader of BC United, leader of the opposition, and the platform pieces that we are rolling out piece by piece, with a lot more to come. But when it comes to affordability, we've proposed to eliminate the 14 cents a litre fuel tax, the up to 14 cents a litre. That would save people every single time they go to fill up their vehicle. We've proposed to freeze the carbon tax. No more increases. We've said, while you're at it, eliminate the carbon tax from all home heating sources. Eliminate the carbon tax from all on-farm production. The combination of actually reducing the fuel taxes and making those changes to the carbon tax would actually drive down transportation costs related to moving goods and groceries and so forth around the province, would actually result in lower grocery prices. But this government's not willing to take us up on these ideas. It would save people money today. And we've said with respect to the carbon tax that because there is a federal mandate in place, if there is a change in policy at the federal level that would come through a federal election that results in the elimination of the carbon tax mandate from a pan-Canadian perspective, then we'll get rid of the carbon tax here in British Columbia as well, because we're not going to allow British Columbians to be at a competitive disadvantage with every other province in this country. The carbon tax is also no longer revenue neutral, as it was when it was first implemented. And it's no longer driving reductions in emissions, which is supposed to be the ultimate objective and the goal of that kind of tax or policy measure. It's not working anymore under this government. How about housing? Well, again, A lot of money being pushed out the door by this government. Lots and lots and lots of announcements and spending around housing. And yet, the worst results this province has ever seen. British Columbia, it's beyond dispute. British Columbia has the highest housing costs anywhere in North America. We have the highest rents in all of Canada. That has happened under this government's watch for 7 years. And housing program after housing program, which have all missed the mark, that are not actually making housing more affordable for British Columbians. In fact, in this budget, while prices are going up, housing construction is projected to go down. Despite all the NDP's housing taxes, the budget forecasts the average house price to increase by 2.3%. Housing starts are projected to fall 8% in 2024. That's almost 4,400 fewer homes that are anticipated to be built. How the heck does this actually, when you're building fewer homes that are costing more, that are selling for a higher price, how is that helping British Columbians struggle through this housing crisis? It's not, Mr. Speaker. And again, in the interests of comparing and contrasting, I'm very proud of the the first phase of a housing plan, which our leader, BC United leader, put out recently, where we said we would eliminate the PST on home construction. That is widely viewed as a measure that would dramatically accelerate construction in volume. That will expedite in a big way projects all around the province. We've said that we would save first-time home buyers $18,000 on a first-time on a purchase of a home up to $1 million. It'd be $18,000 of savings. That's $10,000 more than recently announced initiatives of this NDP government for first-time home buyers. We announced an innovative rent-to-own program, which would basically take the current reality for so many young aspiring British Columbians who want to stay in this province. They want to put roots down. They want to have a family. They want to live and work and grow a business and be here in British Columbia, but they can't because of the cost of housing in particular. It would enable that young couple, that young British Columbian, to actually save up for a down payment in 3 to 5 years as opposed to 25 to 30 years. I mean, the only reason that most young British Columbians are able to even think that they have a chance at saving up a down payment is if they have parents or loved ones that are able to help them out. And most parents do that. We're offering a plan that would actually put home ownership into the sights, the realistic sights of British Columbians. We've said we would move to a 99-year lease model in terms of building a whole bunch of supportive housing. We would support local governments in a much bigger way with local infrastructure. And as I said, there's a lot more coming in the next phase of our housing plan. I want to talk about childcare for a moment because, again, perhaps aside from housing, there's perhaps no other issue that this government has spent as much time and energy and effort extolling the virtues of the great success that is their childcare strategy in this province. When we actually look at the facts, and this is through the lens of all the parents that come and talk to us, all of the ECEs that come and talk to us, the small business operators, the people who run these they all say the same thing. There's not enough spaces in this province. There's not enough ECEs. And this government's been very deliberative in their attack on small businesses, small business operators of childcare. In fact, we profiled in question period in a recent session a briefing note for a minister that was not supposed to be, it wasn't supposed to make its way into our hands, but we obtained it. And it very clearly indicated in there that the government's deliberate policy choices around childcare would have a detrimental effect such that it would actually drive private sector, small business operators of childcare, which are the majority in the province, would drive them out of business. The minister signed off on it. There's a massive gap between what the NDP promise and what they deliver on the ground. And I would point out that when you're putting a childcare operator out of business, the vast majority of these operators are actually women. So for a government that talks the good talk all the time about equity, it's sure curious as to why they have very deliberately, through policy choices and their childcare policy, have taken steps that have had the direct impact of very negatively affecting the ability of a heck of a lot of women to operate childcares around this province. The number of young children between the ages of 0 and 5 years old in childcare has actually decreased by 10,000 since 2019 in British Columbia. That's a fact. Worst of all, failing miserably at implementing their $10 a day childcare for parents who really need it has become almost farcical. The announcements that come out, the parallel reality that we see the Premier, the ministers responsible, the government generally, the parallel universe we see them operating within is quite breathtaking. The NDP promised universal $10 a day daycare, not in one election, but in 2 elections, 2017 and 2020. They didn't have an asterisk at the bottom of the policy that said, well, when we say universal, we actually mean, kind of universal, sort of universal, universal over the next 50 years, universal up to a certain income threshold. No, it was universal childcare for everyone who needs it in this province at $10 a day. And yet here we are 7 years later, and only 10% of childcare spaces across this province, 10% are at that $10 a day rate. And as we've said, and my colleagues have spoken on this, as I have many, many times, if you are lucky enough to be that person that's been able to access a $10 a day space, you've literally won the lottery in this province. Because chances are your neighbor who lives next door or your neighbor who lives across the street is someone that has not been able to access $10 a day. Because they would be in one of the 90% of British Columbians that aren't accessing childcare at that promised $10 a day rate. Mr. Speaker, this is all amplified even more by the fact that not only are the NDP not investing in childcare at the rate that the federal government is investing, but the NDP can't even seem to get federal childcare dollars out the door in a timely fashion. We profiled this the other day. Call it diverse implementation challenges. That's what the Order in Council actually said, that this government signed, that the NDP minister responsible signed. And what was that regulation all about? It was to amend the childcare agreement that this province has with the federal government for the 3rd time in a row in order to roll over unallocated federal childcare dollars. Meanwhile, we have parents in that 90% all over the province that aren't able to access the affordable childcare that they need. The latest federal government childcare report on progress reveals more than just implementation challenges. It actually highlights that of the $105 million earmarked for $10 a day childcare, three quarters of that funding, $78 million, was actually unspent in the last fiscal year. And as I said, the number of spaces offered by family providers for children 5 and under has decreased. Those are not my words. Those are the words in the federal government's progress report on this government's implementation of childcare. Healthcare. I mean, one can devote literally an endless speech to what is the crisis in healthcare. Despite billions and billions of dollars being spent, again, we have amongst the worst results in healthcare that this province has ever seen. We have 1 in 5 without a family doctor. That's actually dreamy. Why? Because in my community of Kamloops, it's actually 2 in 5. 54,000 residents of Kamloops do not have a doctor. We've gone from first to worst in cancer care. So bad that it's not a big bad, former BC Liberal, BC United, or Conservative government that's shipping cancer patients to the United States to a private healthcare system to access cancer care because they can't get it here in British Columbia. It's actually the NDP that are doing it. There was one other government that did the same thing previously in our province's history, Mr. Speaker, It was the NDP in the 1990s, also shipping cancer patients out of the country because of the dire state of cancer care access here in the province. Wait lists for surgery at record highs, diagnostic wait times. I mean, you go on and on. The crisis in healthcare is something I think British Columbians are talking about every single day of the week because it's impacting everyone. We all have loved ones that you find out they need a critical diagnostic exam in order to determine what it is they may or may not have, and that might take 6 to 9 months to get that diagnostic piece done, just to then have a diagnosis so that an appropriate care plan can actually be developed. The length of time it takes in this province is totally unacceptable. Public safety, the catch and release justice system, we profiled that again today. British Columbians are sick and tired of prolific offenders and their rights seeming to be more important than the rights of people to feel safe in their communities. We profiled 2 different pedophiles today, both of whom have been repeatedly released on bail and released back into the community, only to reoffend. Children not being safe. It reflects more than just a system that's broken. It reflects policy choices of this government and this premier over the last 7 years. And enough is enough. People deserve a right to feel safe in their own community. The NDP's reckless decriminalization scheme. The budget actually provides $19 million over 3 years to implement the decriminalization. And we've said all along no to decrim unless there are the guardrails in place. There needs to be adequate access to treatment and recovery programs. There needs to be supports provided to law enforcement. There needs to be education. There needs to be a whole bunch of guardrails in place. And absent those guardrails, the government should have never pursued this reckless careening down the path of decriminalization. And in fact, you just have to look south of us. Seattle, Portland, other cities along the west coast of the United States, they're actually pulling back on their decrim policies, recognizing the tremendous failure that it has been in their jurisdictions. And yet we're careening ahead here in British Columbia. Small businesses on the receiving end of the social disorder and chaos in communities all over the province, whether it's vandalism or thefts or broken glass or their staff and employees feeling intimidated just showing up for work. It's happening all over the province. Not only is that a result of this Premier, this NDP's catch and release justice system, their lack of getting serious about taking tough action to make sure that these prolific offenders are actually dealt with. Not only that, they can't even promise supports to small businesses. They announced a program 8 months ago, small business improvement program. It's a program that's intended to flow some financial support to help those small businesses that have been hit with all that vandalism and theft and broken glass and so forth. $10.5 billion program announced 8 months ago. We were provided with information that confirmed that as of this moment, only $71,000 has been pushed out the door to small businesses impact 8 months later. But the minister says, no, we understand there's a problem. We're working on it. We've got a task force. We've got a group that's doing some stuff, and we're doing a review of a review of a review. Meanwhile, you have all these unbelievable small businesses in our communities that are hanging by a thread, that are looking for whatever help they can get to stay in business, to continue to employ people, to continue to provide that local service product. And this government can't even figure out how to get dollars announced in a program 8 months ago, how to get that support to small businesses. Mental health and addictions, 7 people a day dying in this province. The flooding of our communities with publicly supplied addictive drugs is a strategy that's failing. Diversion is a big problem that's getting worse and worse. Even Bonnie Henry acknowledged that diversion is a real thing. It's happening, even if this government won't come to terms with it. And they're not investing, the government's not investing what needs to be invested in treatment and recovery. There's no new funding, no additional new funding in this budget to build out the treatment and recovery infrastructure that we need in this province, which is a significant feature of our Better as Policy platform, which we announced last year. received rave reviews, would actually focus on helping people access a path of wellness to help them actually get better, both on the mental health side and the addiction side. Mr. Speaker, in the limited time I have left, I want to just talk about, kind of what the future looks like, and the results that I've just, cited with respect to affordability and healthcare and public safety and mental health and addiction and everything. The outcomes are terrible. The results are not good, and yet this government's default is just to keep spending more and more and more and more money. It's time for results for the money spent. It's also time to develop a private sector jobs plan. The piece of the equation that isn't talked about at all on the NDP side is what do we need to do to actually grow the economy? How do we grow a thriving, vibrant, diverse private sector economy? Under the NDP, there's been increasing hostility from this government towards major investments. I'm fearful, as a lot of British Columbians are, that when the Site C project, LNG Canada, TMX, and CGL, when they're finished, when those projects are actually completely done, there is nothing of equal significance coming in the pipeline from a major project perspective. There's $1 billion here and $1 billion there. But I would remind the members that Site C is like a $16 billion project and counting. LNG Canada is a $48.3 billion project. TMX was a $30.9 billion project. CGL, 14.5. It's about $110 billion, employing at peak about 54,000 people. That the total value of major natural resource projects in this province has actually been cut in half by this government. And actions like Clean BC don't help. That was profiled recently when Business Council of BC and others said, Clean BC initiatives will shrink BC's economy by $28 billion by 2030. It will shed hundreds of thousands of jobs. And it's generally because the cost of doing business in this province has gotten to a point where it is really easy for investors, for people around the world, for companies to look elsewhere, to make a different choice, a choice that's not British Columbia. Speaking of which, while we've had a net inflow of people to British Columbia, largely through immigration, BC's share of the national population is shrinking. That's going to affect federal transfers. It's going to mean less dollars. Those transfers are based on per capita funding formulas. But even more concerning is the net out-migration of British Columbians that are leaving for other provinces. This has been happening for 15 months now. It's been happening for a good amount of time. And the most worrying part of this out-migration of British Columbians is that we all know, we all see it, we have a heck of a lot of 18 to 35-year-olds who are leaving British Columbia. Why? Because they cannot see themselves putting roots down here in British Columbia. They can't see themselves ever affording to buy a home, let alone affording rent. They can't see themselves being able to raise a family here in British Columbia. And so they're leaving for Alberta and Ontario and other jurisdictions. That should worry all of us, Mr. Speaker. And so, against the backdrop of all of this spending, all of this taxing, all of this debt, an outflow migration of our young people, a dramatically reduced and continued decline of investment into this province, things have got to change, Mr. Speaker. We cannot continue to careen down this path. And so I look forward to the upcoming election campaign, where these ideas and the government's failed results, the terrible outcomes across the board, contrasted with a hopeful vision and big, bold ideas that we'll continue to put out there. I know British Columbians are going to say they've had enough of this NDP budget and they've had enough of this government. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Fourth Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I add my comments to the budget debate. I want to start off, of course, recognizing my riding, the Chaco Lakes. It's always an honor to be able to stand and speak on behalf of my riding and behalf of the people in my riding. I also want to take a moment just to thank my staff, both the staff here in Victoria, but also my staff in my back in my riding. They do great work on behalf of the people of this province and certainly on behalf of the people in my riding. Also want to just mention my wife, Kim. I'm so blessed to have her support in everything that I'm doing. I can tell you, and I know that all the members here have their partners behind them and supporting them, and it means a world of difference in terms of being able to stand up and do the work. Mr. Speaker, in the budget, in the throne speech actually, there was a recognition of the passing of Patty Sahota. And I wanted to have an opportunity to maybe just say a few words about Patty. I got to know Patty, and I didn't have the honour of serving with her. She was not elected at the same time I was elected. But I got an opportunity to get to know Patty, particularly through forestry and the work by their family company. Numerous times that we would engage and we talk about policy, we talk about the things that were going on for the company and the challenges that they were facing. I got a chance to get to know her reasonably well. We spent many a conversation talking, of course, about politics. She was very passionate about politics, as she was, of course, about the forest sector, as many other things. The one thing I would note about Patty, I mean, the passing was just shocking. I just spent a little bit of time with her traveling. Actually, we were in Calgary together for a bit of time. But the one thing I would note about Patty was she was always trying to do something for other people. She cared very much about family. She cared very much about community. She cared very much about this province. And she was always trying to make things better. Regardless of whatever the situation were around it, that was always her priority, and it came through in everything that she did. I just wanted to extend my condolences to the family. I know it was a huge shock for the family when it happened, and I know even now they're grieving, but they will remember the tenderness and the care that Patty gave to everyone, and especially to families and friends. Mr. Speaker, the budget started off talking about starting from a place of strength. That was an interesting line, I think, because when you look at certainly what's going on in the province, we have a crisis in healthcare, we've got a crisis in affordability, we've got a crisis in housing, we've got a crisis in crime, we've got a crisis in addiction. I'm not sure exactly what this NDP government's definition of strength, starting from strength is, but perhaps just maybe come up and talk to the people in my riding about starting from a position of strength. Fraser Lake losing a sawmill just recently because of horrendous policies that we have in forestry. Vanderhoof going down to the Nechako lumber, going down to just one shift because it's been between 2 and 3 years since permits have been issued through the BC timber sales. Right across my riding in terms of agriculture, there was a promise of assistance, and only a very small amount that has come out. We obviously got hit very hard with the drought. And I would have to say, Mr. Speaker, that's not exactly what I would say a position of strength. The policies and approaches by this government have been very, very challenging for my riding of the Chaco Lakes, as well as I think for most people around this province. Some things that they could look at, I think in terms of changes, and these are things that I was hoping to hear about in the budget. There are 4 natural gas pipelines permitted to the coast. One is being built. LNG Canada with the Coastal GasLink has been built. There are 3 others that are still permitted to go. Those permits expire. They will be coming up for expiration starting this fall and going into next year. They do not have the opportunity to ask for another extension. They've already had a 5-year extension. There's no reason why these permits should not be extended for another decade. There's no reason they need to go back and do another environmental assessment. Give the people hope, give the sector hope so that we can actually see more opportunities with LNG, extend those permits. Mining, Mr. Speaker, the government talked about another plan. They're going to do more studying about mining. There are currently 14 mines in this province that are either permitted or about to be permitted. Those are 14 mines that could go ahead that would represent a $38 billion investment, represent between 20 and 30,000 jobs, and generate $800 billion in GDP. For the people in my riding, mining is the second or third most important sector for people in my riding. Mining is critical. Why are we not looking at how, as a strategy from this budget, is how we can accelerate those projects and get them in the ground, get them working, get them supporting people and revenue in this province? Forestry, I just touched on. Forest policy needs a complete reversal of where this government's going. The costs, we're the highest cost producers in North America. The industry is struggling. It is on its knees. It needs some recognition and some support. It most of all needs a champion to be able to stand up and actually say that forestry is a backbone of this province and it's needed. Let's talk about the values of those products and what needs to be produced. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, agriculture, of course, needs some support throughout my riding. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we only procure 34% of the food that we consume in British Columbia from British Columbia. That means that 2/3 of the food that we need comes from outside of our jurisdiction. We need to be looking at doubling our food production in this province. We need to be figuring out how we drive down those costs. We're the highest cost producer, once again, of agricultural products. That, to me, Mr. Speaker, should be a critical focus of a government and certainly of a budget. Mr. Speaker, when I look at all the challenges, particularly when I think about health care, and I talked about the crisis we have in health care, I want to relay a story from a nurse from my riding. She goes out and she's in charge of looking after home care for seniors in particular that are in desperate need of support. And she's in tears almost every day because she has to tell families, she has to tell seniors that we don't have any support for them. We don't have the people. We can't help them. Mr. Speaker, this is not a compassionate form of healthcare. This is not what we need as a healthcare system in this province. There's so many more things I could go on with regards to that, Mr. Speaker, but one of the first things that, quite frankly, we need to do in healthcare is hire back our healthcare workers. Drop these ridiculous mandates. We're the only jurisdiction in North America, if not in the world, that hasn't dropped them and hired back our workers. There is absolutely no reason to be able to do that. And Mr. Speaker, it's one of the most important things for delivering the services that are needed in my riding. So let me wrap up, Mr. Speaker, and say this about the budget. I look at this budget, quite frankly, as a lost opportunity. It is shoveling money out of the back of the truck. It is shoveling money out to try to buy votes. It has not created a foundation for a solid future in this province. It is fiscally irresponsible. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, after 7 years of NDP budgets and NDP process, I find it shocking that they have not put forward the pieces that are needed to truly care for the people of the province of British Columbia. People cannot afford this government. People cannot afford what is going forward. They need an option, and I very much look forward to the election in 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, noting the hour, the House has reached the maximum time allocated for budget debate under Schedule 2 of Standing Order 45A. As such, I will put the question on the motion before the House, which is that the Speaker do not leave the chair for the House to go into Committee of Supply. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Division has been called. Honorable members, you heard the question before, and I'll repeat again. The chair is going to put the question on the motion before the House, which is that the Speaker do not leave the chair for the House to go into Committee of Supply. All those in favor, please rise or indicate. Thank you. Be seated. Those who oppose, please rise or indicate. Thank you. Be seated. Madam Clerk.
Those voting aye, Chandra Herbert, Parmar, Sims. Oh, pardon me. Those voting virtually, Mr. Klovchuk.
I vote nay.
Thank you. And Mr. Shapitka.
I vote nay.
Thank you. Those voting aye, Chandra Herbert, Parmar, Sims, Coulter, Lord, Chow, Bear, Kang, Ma, Heyman, Osborne, Cullen, Baines, Malcolmson, Bailey, Mercier, Brar, Russell, Rutledge, Starchuk, Rice, Phillip, Leonard, Yao, Whiteside, Farnworth, Callon, Sharma, Dix, Popham, Fleming, Dean, Rankin, Ralston, Alexis, Robinson, Simons, Elmore, Glumac, Routley, Deeth, Donnelly, Green, Anderson, Chant, Sandhu, Dykeman, Padden, Begg, A. Singh, Firstnell, Olson, and Walker, 53. Those voting nay, Dirksen, Millibar, Stone, Bond, Halford, Ross, Oakes, Davies, Morris, Kylo, Shapitka, Sturko, Merrifield, Watt, Lee, Kirkpatrick, Stewart, Klovchuk, Ashton, Sturdy, Letnick, Tagert, Rustad, and Banman, 24.
Motion passed. Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I move the House now adjourn.
Member, you heard the question. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. The House will stand adjourned until 1:30 p.m. this afternoon.